In this video, I'll review AP Psychology Unit 1 in about 40 minutes. Occasionally throughout the video, I'll refer to the study guide worksheets that you can grab via the link in the description. They're designed for you to fill out while watching this video so you can thoroughly study this whole unit as fast as possible. Okay, let's dive in. Unit 1 covers the biological basis of behavior in 6 sections. Let's dive right into the first section, which is titled Interaction of Heredity and Environment. This section explores what is colloquially known as the nature versus nurture debate, where heredity is nature and environment is nurture. Heredity, or nature, refers to genetic or predisposed characteristics that influence physical, behavioral, and mental traits and processes. These are the characteristics that we are born with. They're part of our biology. On the other hand, environmental factors, or nurture, refers to the external factors that influence us, such as family interactions or education. Historically, there was a big debate between the two sides of this issue. Some people believed heredity, or nature, was the predominant influence on individuals. Other people believed the environment, or nurture, was what influenced our behaviors and characteristics. However, remember that there's a middle way, the interactionist perspective, which merges the nature versus nurture debate. It argues that genetics and environment do not work in isolation, but both have their own influence to help shape human behavior, personality, and development. Another thing you need to know for Unit 1.1 is the evolutionary perspective. This perspective explores how natural selection affects human behaviors and mental processes. The traits that ensure survival and reproductive success become dominant traits in humans, while traits that are less useful for survival and reproduction become less pronounced. While this theory is evidently true, some people have historically used this theory to justify discrimination against others in a debunked theory called eugenics. Eugenics is the idea that people can improve the human race by encouraging those with desirable traits to have children and preventing those with undesirable traits from reproducing. It misuses evolutionary psychology's concept of natural selection by attempting to play God. Today, scientists reject eugenics because it denies the dignity and rights of all humans, and, from a scientific perspective, it ignores the complexity of how traits develop in the real world. The final thing we need to know for Unit 1.1 is the research on nature versus nurture. Scientists have studied the effects of heredity and environment using twin, family, and adoption studies. Twin studies compare identical twins who share almost 100% of their genes, and fraternal twins who on average share about 50% of their genes, to see how much traits are influenced by genetics. If identical twins are more alike in a trait than fraternal twins, it suggests that genes play a bigger role. By studying twins raised in different environments, scientists can also see how much the environment affects traits like intelligence and personality. Family studies look at how traits run in families by comparing parents, siblings, and extended relatives. If a trait appears more often in closely related family members, it suggests genetics play a role. However, since families also share environments, it can be hard to tell whether genes or surroundings have a bigger influence. Adoption studies compare adopted children to both their biological and adoptive families to see whether genes or environment have a stronger effect. If a child is more similar to their biological parents, it suggests genetics play a bigger role, while similarities to adoptive parents point to environmental influences. These studies help scientists understand traits like intelligence, personality, and even the risk of certain diseases. These 3 types of studies have shown that both nature and nurture play important roles in shaping who we become, reinforcing the interactionist perspective on psychological development. Okay, that brings us to the end of Unit 1.1. If you're following along using the study guide, you should have filled out all of the questions for the first page now. You can check your answers using the answer key worksheet I've provided. If you're a premium member, you can also pause here and go into our Study Coach portal, where you'll find additional study quizzes and video walkthroughs for this section where I discuss how to answer typical exam questions. Now let's move on to Unit 1.2, titled Overview of the Nervous System. This section focuses on the different subsystems of the nervous system and how they function. The nervous system is the body's communication network, responsible for transmitting signals and coordinating actions. It is divided into 2 main parts: the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system consists of the brain and spinal cord. The brain acts as the command center, controlling thoughts, emotions, movement, and vital functions like breathing and heart rate. The spinal cord serves as a highway, relaying messages between the brain and the rest of the body. It also plays a key role in reflexes, which are automatic responses to stimuli. For example, when you touch something hot, your hand pulls away before your brain even fully processes the pain. This happens because the spinal cord can trigger reflexive actions without needing input from the brain. The peripheral nervous system extends beyond the brain and spinal cord, carrying messages between the central nervous system and the rest of the body. It is further divided into the autonomic nervous system and the somatic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system controls involuntary bodily functions, meaning processes that happen automatically without conscious effort. It consists of two branches that work together to regulate the body's internal state. The sympathetic nervous system prepares the body for action in stressful situations by increasing heart rate, dilating pupils, and releasing adrenaline. This response, commonly known as the fight or flight response, helps the body react quickly to danger. In contrast, the parasympathetic nervous system has the opposite effect, calming the body after stress has passed. It slows the heart rate, promotes digestion, and conserves energy, which is why it is often referred to as the rest and digest system. While the autonomic nervous system regulates automatic functions, the somatic nervous system controls voluntary movements. This part of the nervous system allows us to consciously move our muscles, enabling actions like walking, writing, or raising a hand in class. When you decide to move, the brain sends signals through the somatic nervous system to the appropriate muscles, making the movement happen. This system is what allows us to interact with the world in an intentional way. Okay, that was a lot. So let's summarize it all before moving on. If you're following along using the study guide, fill in the diagram on page 2 as we summarize. The central nervous system consists of the brain and spinal cord and is responsible for processing information and coordinating all bodily functions. The peripheral nervous system connects the central nervous system to the rest of the body and is divided into two main parts. The autonomic nervous system controls involuntary functions, with the sympathetic nervous system triggering the fight or flight response, and the parasympathetic nervous system restoring balance after stress. The somatic nervous system, on the other hand, governs voluntary movements, allowing us to perform intentional actions. Now let's move on to Unit 1.3, titled The Neuron and Neural Firing. This section focuses on how cells in the central nervous system influence behavior and mental processes. To begin, let's explore the nervous system. There are two main types of neural cells that support the nervous system: neurons and glial cells. Neurons are responsible for carrying electrical and chemical signals, while glial cells provide support by maintaining structure, insulating neurons, facilitating communication, and removing waste. Both types of cells work together to ensure the nervous system functions properly. Let's zoom in on neurons, as Unit 1.3 asks us to demonstrate how three types of neurons work together in a process called a reflex arc. Reflex arcs are rapid, automatic responses to stimuli that do not require input from the brain. The spinal cord contains three types of neurons that work together to form the reflex arc: sensory neurons, motor neurons, and interneurons. Sensory neurons detect stimuli and send signals to the spinal cord. Interneurons process this information and relay it to motor neurons, which then send signals to muscles to produce a response. For example, if you touch something hot, sensory neurons in your skin send a message to the spinal cord, where interneurons quickly process the information and activate motor neurons, causing you to pull your hand away before you consciously register the pain. This quick reaction helps protect the body from harm. Next, we need to know about a process called neural transmission. This process is essential for all thoughts, emotions, and movements, and follows a specific sequence. At rest, a neuron maintains a resting potential, meaning it has a stable charge. When stimulated, the neuron reaches its threshold, triggering depolarization, which causes an electrical signal to travel down the neuron. This signal follows the all-or-nothing principle, meaning the neuron either fires completely or not at all. After firing, the neuron enters a refractory period, a brief moment when it cannot fire again. Once the signal reaches the end of the neuron, chemicals called neurotransmitters are released into the synapse, the tiny gap between neurons. These neurotransmitters are then either reabsorbed in a process called reuptake or broken down. This entire process allows signals to travel rapidly through the nervous system, enabling thought, movement, and perception. Disruptions to neural transmission can have significant effects on behavior and mental processes. If neurons do not function properly, communication within the nervous system is impaired. For example, multiple sclerosis is a disorder where the protective covering of neurons is damaged, slowing or blocking signals between the brain and body. This can lead to symptoms such as muscle weakness and coordination problems. Another disorder, myasthenia gravis, occurs when communication between neurons and muscles is disrupted, causing muscle weakness and fatigue. These conditions highlight how essential proper neural function is for everyday activities. Now that you know the neural transmission process, we can talk about the different types of neurotransmitters and their functions. Some neurotransmitters are excitatory, meaning they make a neuron more likely to fire, while others are inhibitory, meaning they make a neuron less likely to fire. The neurotransmitters you may be assessed on in AP Psychology are dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, glutamate, GABA, endorphins, substance P, and acetylcholine. Dopamine is associated with movement, motivation, and the brain's reward system. Serotonin influences mood, appetite, and sleep. Norepinephrine plays a role in alertness and the body's response to stress. Glutamate is the brain's main excitatory neurotransmitter, essential for learning and memory, while gamma-aminobutyric acid, or GABA, is the main inhibitory neurotransmitter, helping to regulate neural activity and prevent overstimulation. Endorphins act as natural painkillers, reducing discomfort and promoting pleasure. Substance P helps transmit pain signals, and acetylcholine is involved in muscle movement, attention, and memory. The balance of these neurotransmitters is critical for normal cognitive and emotional functioning, and imbalances can contribute to mental health conditions such as depression or anxiety. In addition to neurotransmitters, hormones also influence behavior and mental processes, though they function differently. While neurotransmitters travel quickly across synapses, hormones are released into the bloodstream, producing effects that are slower but longer lasting. Some key hormones include adrenaline, which prepares the body for action by increasing heart rate and energy levels in response to stress. Leptin and ghrelin regulate hunger, with leptin signaling fullness and ghrelin increasing appetite. Melatonin helps regulate sleep cycles, while oxytocin plays a role in social bonding, trust, and emotional connection. Although hormones and neurotransmitters operate through different systems, they often work together to regulate emotions, behavior, and bodily responses. We're almost done with Unit 1.3, but we still have one more thing to cover: the effects of psychoactive drugs on behaviors and mental processes. Psychoactive drugs can alter neural activity by interfering with neurotransmitter function. Some drugs act as agonists, which mimic neurotransmitters and enhance neural firing. Others function as antagonists, which block neurotransmitters and reduce neural activity. Some drugs interfere with reuptake, preventing neurotransmitters from being reabsorbed and prolonging their effects. These alterations can significantly impact behavior, mood, and cognition. Different types of psychoactive drugs affect the nervous system in specific ways. Stimulants, such as caffeine and cocaine, increase neural activity, leading to heightened alertness and energy. Depressants, such as sedatives, slow down neural activity, producing relaxation and drowsiness. Hallucinogens, such as marijuana, distort perception and cognition, altering sensory experiences. Opioids, such as heroin, act as powerful pain relievers by mimicking the effects of endorphins. Long-term use of psychoactive drugs can lead to tolerance, meaning the body requires larger doses to achieve the same effect. Continued use can also result in addiction, where the brain becomes dependent on the drug. If drug use is suddenly stopped, withdrawal symptoms can occur, which may cause physical and psychological distress. Okay, so that's Unit 1.3. It's a big section, so let's break down what you need to know in a checklist. First, you need to know that neurons and glial cells form the foundation of the nervous system, with neurons transmitting signals and glial cells providing essential support. Second, You need to know that reflex arcs demonstrate how different neurons work together in the spinal cord to produce automatic responses. Third, you need to know that neural transmission follows a structured process, including resting potential, threshold, depolarization, the all-or-nothing principle, the refractory period, and reuptake. Fourth, you need to know that neurotransmitters influence behavior and mental processes by either promoting or inhibiting neural activity, with dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, glutamate, GABA, endorphins, substance P, and acetylcholine playing critical roles. Fifth, you need to know that hormones regulate functions such as stress, hunger, sleep, and social bonding. Sixth, you need to know that psychoactive drugs modify neurotransmitter function, altering mental and physical states. And seventh, you need to know that long-term drug use can lead to tolerance, addiction, and withdrawal, highlighting the complex relationship between brain chemistry and behavior. There were a lot of terms in that section, so in addition to completing the section's study guide, I'd recommend printing out the vocabulary flashcards I provided and going through them on a regular basis to reinforce these terms and concepts. Now, let's move on to Unit 1.4, which focuses on the different structures of the brain and how they contribute to behavior and mental processes. This unit requires a lot of rote memorization of the parts of the brain. So, let's go through the parts of the brain, starting with the brainstem. The brainstem is the oldest and most primitive part of the brain, responsible for basic life-sustaining functions. It includes the medulla, which regulates essential processes such as breathing, heart rate, and digestion. Damage to the medulla can be fatal as it controls functions necessary for survival. Above the brainstem, the reticular activating system helps regulate alertness and attention. It plays a role in voluntary movement, eye movement, and some types of learning, cognition, and emotion. This system is also involved in the sleep-wake cycle, influencing levels of consciousness and focus. Another key structure involved in motivation and learning is the brain's reward center, which reinforces behaviors that promote survival by releasing pleasurable chemicals when we engage in activities such as eating or socializing. The cerebellum, located at the back of the brain, is responsible for coordinating movement, maintaining balance, and supporting procedural learning. This part of the brain allows for smooth, precise movements and is crucial for activities such as walking, writing, or playing an instrument. Although it is not involved in conscious thought, the cerebellum is essential for developing motor skills and muscle memory. The cerebral cortex is the largest and most complex part of the brain. It is divided into two hemispheres and contains specialized regions responsible for perception, thought, language, and decision-making. Within the cerebral cortex, the limbic system includes the thalamus, hypothalamus, pituitary gland, hippocampus, and amygdala, all of which are involved in regulating emotions, memory, and motivation. The thalamus acts as a relay center, directing sensory information to the appropriate areas of the brain. The hypothalamus helps regulate homeostasis, including hunger, thirst, and body temperature. The pituitary gland controls hormone release, influencing growth and metabolism. The hippocampus is essential for forming and retrieving memories, while the amygdala plays a key role in processing emotions, particularly fear and aggression. The cerebral cortex is further divided into 4 lobes, each responsible for different functions. The occipital lobes, located at the back of the brain, process visual information. The temporal lobes, located on the sides of the brain, are involved in auditory processing and language comprehension. The parietal lobes, located near the back crown of the head, contain association areas that organize and interpret sensory information. Within the parietal lobes, the somatosensory cortex processes touch, temperature, and pain sensations. The frontal lobes, located just behind the forehead, are responsible for higher-order thinking, decision-making, and executive functioning. The prefrontal cortex within the frontal lobes plays a role in reasoning, impulse control, and personality. At the rear of the frontal lobes, the motor cortex directs voluntary movement by sending signals to the muscles. Okay, so those are the key parts of the brain you need to know about for Unit 1.4. Clearly, we just covered a lot of terms and it's going to take time to memorize them. The flashcard set I provided in the link in the description contains all those terms, so make sure you print those flashcards and revisit them regularly. Next up, we have to cover some basic knowledge about split brain research. This is research involving patients whose corpus callosum, the connection between the brain's two hemispheres, is severed. These unique patients give us insight into how the two hemispheres of the brain function. For example, in cases of severe epilepsy, the corpus callosum is sometimes severed to prevent seizures from spreading. This procedure has revealed that the right and left hemispheres specialize in different functions. The left hemisphere typically processes language. It contains Broca's area, which is responsible for speech production, and Wernicke's area, which is responsible for speech comprehension. Damage to these areas can result in aphasia, a condition that affects language ability. Let's look at a hypothetical split brain research study to better understand what these types of studies reveal about our brain's two hemispheres. Imagine we have a patient whose corpus callosum has been split so their brain hemispheres cannot communicate with one another. The experimenter places a spoon in the patient's left hand without letting them see it. Touch from the left hand is processed exclusively by the right hemisphere, so the patient's right hemisphere knows what they are holding. However, the right hemisphere cannot send this information to the left hemisphere, where language is processed, due to the severed corpus callosum. Without this connection, the patient's speech center remains unaware of what the right hemisphere knows, and therefore the patient cannot tell the researcher what they're holding. The left hemisphere remains oblivious. Interestingly, the left hand could still point to a picture of a spoon, demonstrating that the patient knows what they're holding, but just cannot verbalize it due to the split brain phenomenon. Despite the brain's specialized areas, it has the ability to adapt and reorganize itself, a property known as brain plasticity. This ability allows the brain to form new connections and compensate for damage. If one part of the brain is injured, another part may take over its function, especially during early development. Brain plasticity also plays a role in learning and memory, as new experiences strengthen or modify neural pathways. To study the brain, researchers use a variety of techniques, including brain scans, case studies, and surgical procedures. Electroencephalograms, or EEGs, measure electrical activity in the brain and are often used to study sleep and neural activity. Functional magnetic resonance imaging tracks blood flow to different brain regions, showing which areas are active during certain tasks. Case studies of individuals with brain injuries have provided insight into the functions of different brain structures. In some cases, surgical procedures such as lesioning involve intentionally damaging a part of the brain to study its effects, helping researchers understand how specific brain regions contribute to behavior and cognition. Okay, that brings us to the end of Unit 1.4. Let's break down what you need to know in a checklist before we move on. First, you need to know about the brainstem and medulla, which regulates essential processes such as breathing, heart rate, and digestion. Second, you need to know the different regions of the brain that are responsible for various functions, including movement, balance, sensory processing, memory, emotions, and higher-order thinking. Third, you need to know that the brain is divided into two hemispheres, which communicate through the corpus callosum, and that split brain research has shown how each hemisphere specializes in certain tasks, particularly in language processing. Fourth, you need to know that brain plasticity allows the brain to reorganize and form new connections, which helps with learning and recovery from injury. And fifth, you need to know how researchers study the brain using scans, case studies, and surgical procedures to understand how different brain structures influence behavior and mental processes. That's it for Unit 1.4. It's time to move on to Unit 1.5, which is all about sleep. For Unit 1.5, we first need to be able to explain the sleep-wake cycle and how it affects behavior and mental processes. Sleep is one of two primary states of consciousness, the other being wakefulness. Humans go through a daily sleep-wake cycle, which is regulated by a biological process known as the circadian rhythm. This rhythm is controlled by environmental cues like light and temperature, helping the body maintain a regular pattern of sleep and wakefulness. Sometimes the circadian rhythm is disrupted, and this can negatively impact cognitive and physical functioning. For example, jet lag occurs when a person travels across multiple time zones, causing their internal clock to be misaligned with the local time. Similarly, shift work, which requires people to be awake at night and sleep during the day, can interfere with natural sleep patterns, leading to fatigue, mood disturbances, and decreased alertness. Sleep itself is divided into distinct stages. Non-rapid eye movement sleep, or NREM sleep, consists of 3 stages that become progressively deeper. Stage 1 is the lightest stage of sleep, often accompanied by brief sensory experiences known as hypnagogic sensations, such as the feeling of falling. Stage 2 is a transitional stage where the body prepares for deep sleep. Stage 3 is the deepest stage of sleep, playing a crucial role in physical restoration and immune system function. As the night progresses, the duration of NREM sleep decreases, while rapid eye movement sleep, or REM sleep, becomes more frequent. REM sleep is often called paradoxical sleep because brain activity during this stage closely resembles wakefulness, yet the body remains at its most relaxed state due to temporary muscle paralysis. This is the stage where most dreaming occurs. When people are deprived of REM sleep, they may experience REM rebound, meaning they enter REM sleep more quickly and spend more time in this stage when they next sleep. Unit 1.5 also asks us to explore psychological theories about why dreams occur. One theory is called the activation synthesis theory, which suggests that dreams result from random neural activity in the brainstem that the brain then interprets as meaningful experiences. Another is the consolidation theory, which proposes that dreams help process and store memories, strengthening learning and problem-solving skills. Although there are multiple perspectives on the function of dreams, they remain an area of ongoing research. But why do we sleep? Well, sleep itself is believed to serve important functions beyond dreaming. One major theory suggests that sleep plays a role in memory consolidation by organizing and strengthening newly acquired information. Another theory argues that sleep restores energy and replenishes biochemical resources used throughout the day, contributing to overall cognitive and physical well-being. In Unit 1.5, we also need to explore several sleep disorders. The ones you need to know about for AP Psychology are shown on the screen now. Insomnia is characterized by difficulty falling or staying asleep. Narcolepsy is a neurological disorder that causes sudden and uncontrollable sleep episodes during the day. REM sleep behavior disorder occurs when the body does not experience normal REM sleep paralysis, allowing individuals to physically act out their dreams. Sleep apnea involves repeated interruptions in breathing during sleep, often leading to poor sleep quality and daytime fatigue. Somnambulism, or sleepwalking, occurs when individuals engage in complex behaviors while still asleep, typically during deep NREM sleep. Managing sleep disorders through lifestyle adjustments, medical treatments, and maintaining a regular sleep schedule can improve overall health and cognitive performance. Okay, so that's Unit 1.5. Let's break down what you need to know in a checklist before we move on. First, you need to know that sleep is one of 2 primary states of consciousness, the other being wakefulness, and that both are regulated by the circadian rhythm, a biological process that follows a roughly 24-hour cycle. Second, you need to know that disruptions to the circadian rhythm, such as jet lag and shift work, can negatively affect cognitive and physical functioning. Third, you need to know that sleep occurs in distinct stages. Non-rapid eye movement sleep consists of 3 progressively deeper stages, while rapid eye movement sleep is the stage where most dreaming occurs. Fourth, you need to know that REM sleep is called paradoxical sleep because brain activity resembles wakefulness while the body remains in a deeply relaxed state. Fifth, you need to know that theories about dreams include the activation synthesis theory, which suggests that dreams result from random neural activity, and the consolidation theory, which proposes that dreams help process and store memories. Sixth, you need to know that sleep serves functions beyond dreaming, including memory consolidation and physical restoration. And seventh, you need to know that sleep disorders such as insomnia, narcolepsy, REM sleep behavior disorder, sleep apnea, and somnambulism can interfere with normal sleep and impact health. But treatment strategies can help improve sleep quality and cognitive functioning. Now, let's move on to Unit 1.6, titled Sensation. Sensation is the process of detecting information from the environment and converting it into neural signals for processing in the brain. There are a few key terms you need to know for this section, so let's go through them in order. First, you need to know what the absolute threshold is. This refers to the minimum intensity at which a stimulus can be detected at least half the time. Another key term is the just noticeable difference. This refers to the smallest detectable change in stimulus intensity. Note that just noticeable difference refers to detecting change, while absolute threshold refers to detecting anything at all. The next key term is Weber's law. This law states that the ability to detect differences depends on the proportion of change rather than a fixed amount. As the intensity of a stimulus increases, a larger change is needed for a person to perceive a difference. This is confusing, so we're definitely going to need an example here. In general, if you are holding a light object, a small weight change is noticeable, but if you are holding a heavy object, a much larger weight change is needed to detect a difference. This is the essence of Weber's law. Our next term is sensory adaptation. This occurs when the body becomes less sensitive to unchanging stimuli over time. For example, we become accustomed to stimuli such as strong smells and loud background noises. As we become accustomed to them, we tend to notice them less. Okay, the next term is sensory interaction. It refers to the way different senses work together to enhance perception and understanding of the environment. For example, taste is strongly influenced by smell, which is why food seems bland when you have a cold. This interplay between senses helps improve accuracy and perception. However, it can also have funny effects. In rare cases, people experience synesthesia, a condition in which stimulation of one sense leads to experiences in another. For example, a friend of mine sees green when he hears the word Tuesday. Now we're going to dive into our various sensory systems. AP Psychology requires you to be able to explain the structures and functions of the visual, auditory, chemical, touch, and pain systems. Let's start with the visual sensory system. The visual system relies on physical structures in the eye to capture and process light, as shown in this diagram. The retina, located at the back of the eye, contains specialized cells that detect light and convert it into neural signals. The lens toward the front of the eye helps us achieve focus through a process called accommodation, which adjusts focus for near or far objects. When accommodation is impaired, conditions like nearsightedness or farsightedness can occur. Two types of photoreceptor cells process visual information. Rods, located in the periphery of the retina, detect shapes and movement. They contain a pigment called rhodopsin, which is extremely sensitive to dim light. This allows them to function effectively in low light conditions. However, rods do not detect color, which is why night vision is mostly in shades of gray. Cones, concentrated in the fovea, process color in fine detail. Interestingly, we have a blind spot in our vision, right where the optic nerve exits the eye. You would think that we would therefore have a black circle in our vision at all times, but the brain is clever enough to fill in the missing details to create a complete image. The other thing we need to cover when talking about the visual sensory system is color vision. There are two major theories that explain how we can see color. The trichromatic theory explains how colors are detected in the retina. It states that three types of cones sensitive to red, green, and blue wavelengths combine to produce the perception of color. The opponent process theory explains how colors are processed after they leave the retina. It states that pairs of opposing colors, red-green, blue-yellow, and black-white, are processed together in the visual system. Damage to the cones or the opponent processing system can lead to color vision deficiencies such as red-green or blue-yellow color blindness. Similarly, damage to the brain's visual processing centers, particularly in the occipital lobes, can result in disorders such as prosopagnosia, which affects facial recognition, and blind sight, in which individuals with visual damage can respond to visual stimuli without consciously seeing them. Okay, we're done with our discussion of the visual processing system. Let's move on to the auditory system, which is all about how we can hear. Sound occurs through the movement of air molecules at different wavelengths, called pitch, and amplitudes, called loudness. Our ears help us to interpret wavelengths as sounds in a process called pitch perception. Several theories explain pitch perception. Place theory suggests that different frequencies activate different locations along the cochlea, which is an organ in the ear that enables hearing. Frequency theory proposes that pitch perception is based on how frequently neurons fire in response to sound waves. Volley theory suggests that groups of neurons fire in alternating sequences to encode higher frequency sounds. The ability to determine where a sound is coming from, known as sound localization, relies on detecting differences in how sounds reach each ear. We also need to have an understanding of how hearing difficulties occur. They generally result from aging or damage to the auditory structures. Two types of deafness are explicitly mentioned in the AP Psychology curriculum. The first is conduction deafness, which occurs when sound waves cannot reach the cochlea due to problems in the outer or middle ear. The second is sensorineural deafness, which results from damage to the cochlea's hair cells or damage to the auditory nerve, often leading to permanent hearing loss. Next up, we have the chemical sensory systems, which detect smell and taste. The sense of smell, or olfaction, is unique among the senses because it is processed primarily in the brain's olfactory regions rather than the thalamus. Olfactory receptors detect airborne molecules which are then interpreted as scents. A unique set of chemical signals that we interpret through olfaction, known as pheromones, have a strong influence on social and biological behavior. For example, humans release pheromones to attract a mate. Females release pheromones to signal fertility. Mothers can detect the pheromones of their own offspring to ensure proper care and bonding. And ants lay pheromone trails to guide others to food. The sense of taste, or gustation, is also considered a chemical sensory system. This system detects different flavors including sweet, sour, salty, bitter, umami, which is savory, and oleogustus, which is fatty. Taste receptors on the tongue vary in sensitivity from person to person, so we can classify people as super tasters, medium tasters, or non-tasters. Interestingly, the chemical senses of taste and smell work together to create the full experience of flavor, which is why food tastes different when a person has a blocked nose. Now we'll move on to the sense of touch. Touch is processed by specialized receptors in the skin that detect pressure, temperature, and pain. The sensation of hot occurs when both warm and cold receptors are activated simultaneously. There are two important concepts you need to remember about the sense of touch. First is the gate control theory, which suggests that the spinal cord regulates the transmission of pain signals. This theory demonstrates that pain is processed both in the body and the brain. The other important concept is phantom limb sensation. This occurs when individuals experience pain or other sensations in a limb that has been amputated, indicating that pain is influenced by neural processing beyond physical stimuli. The last thing we need to cover for Unit 1.6 is how our bodies maintain balance and coordinate movement. There are two systems that work together for this: the vestibular system and the kinesthetic system. Let's start with the vestibular system. This system is located in the inner ear. It senses movement by detecting changes in head position and sending signals to the brain. This helps with posture, coordination, and spatial awareness. When this system is disrupted, it can cause dizziness, trouble with balance, or motion sickness. The other system that regulates body movement is the kinesthetic system. This system helps the body sense its position and movement via receptors in muscles, joints, and tendons. It allows us to move smoothly, coordinate our actions, and control our strength without needing to look at our body. This system is essential for activities like walking, picking up objects, and maintaining posture. That brings us to the end of Unit 1.6. Let's quickly review. First, you need to know that sensation is the process of detecting stimuli from the environment and converting them into neural signals for the brain to process. Second, you need to know our key concepts about sensation. These include absolute threshold, the just noticeable difference, Weber's law, and sensory adaptation. Third, you need to know that different senses can work together to enhance perception in a process called sensory interaction. In rare cases, one sense can trigger another in a process called synesthesia. Fourth, you need to know that vision is explained by the trichromatic and opponent process theories. Fifth, you need to know that hearing is explained by place theory, frequency theory, and volley theory. Sixth, you need to know that taste and smell are chemical senses that work together to create the full experience of flavor. Seventh, you need to know that the gate control theory explains how pain is processed in the body and brain, while phantom limb sensations show how pain can be experienced even without a physical stimulus. And eighth, you need to know about the two systems that allow for balance and coordinated body movement: the vestibular system and the kinesthetic system. So you've got all the key information for Unit 1. but you'll need to have the ability to apply it in the exam. So here's what you need to do next. Grab the study guide and the link in the description to reinforce your knowledge of this information. Become a premium member to get in-depth tutorials and video walkthroughs of common Unit 1 questions you could face in the AP exam. And once you feel confident about Unit 1, click the video on screen now to watch my full AP Psychology Unit 2 review.